Not married, my princess, Norma corrected her softly, the weight of her words heavy in the air. He is now mad. The words struck Achalugo like a thunderbolt. What do you mean, mad? Emeka is mad? How? Tears instantly began streaming down her face. Once upon a time, in a distant and wondrous kingdom called Udu, nestled in the western parts of Africa, there lived a king whose riches were as vast as the oceans and whose heart was as warm as the sun. His name was King Azuka, and he was adored by all his subjects for his kindness and generosity. The kingdom he ruled was lush and green, filled with enchanting forests and sparkling rivers that danced under the sunlight. King Azuka was married to a woman of breathtaking beauty named Chibugo. Her grace and kindness made her beloved by everyone who met her. Together, they were blessed with a daughter whom they named Achalugo, which means the beautiful one. Achalugo was a sight to behold. Her beauty was so profound that it seemed to light up the room. Her face had the radiance of the morning sun, and her skin was as smooth and flawless as polished ivory. Everyone who saw her marveled at her, for her beauty was unlike any other. The princess was so cherished by her parents that they considered her their most treasured possession, the crown jewel of their lives. To them, she was everything precious and wonderful, and they showered her with all the beautiful things a princess could dream of: glistening jewels, silken gowns, and the finest toys. But despite all these treasures, Achalugo lived a life quite different from other young girls. Her beauty was so extraordinary that her parents, the king and queen, worried endlessly about her. They believed her beauty was dazzling. It could attract not just admirers but also danger. So, they made a decision to keep her hidden away from the world. Except for her loving parents, a trusted maid who cared for her, and the palace workers, no one was allowed to see Achalugo's face. On the rare occasions she left the palace, usually during the grand festivals that marked the kingdom's calendar, Achalugo was always veiled, her face covered with a delicate fabric that shimmered like the morning dew, ensuring that no one could gaze upon her. This shroud of mystery around her beauty fueled wild rumors among the townspeople. Whispers spread that Achalugo was not merely a princess, but a divine being, a goddess of the sun whose radiance was too powerful for mortal eyes. Some said looking directly at her would be like looking at the sun, too brilliant and overwhelming. This mystic made her the subject of many legends and tales among the people. Yet, through all this, the king and queen were unmoved by the stories. Their only concern was the safety of their beloved daughter. They feared that if her beauty were fully revealed, it could somehow lead to her harm. They wanted nothing more than to protect their precious jewel from any danger. Content to keep her within the safety of the palace walls, where they could watch over her and ensure she remained untouched by the world's troubles. Princess Achalugo often felt a deep loneliness that lingered in the quiet corners of the vast palace. Surrounded only by the high walls and guarded gates, her world was confined to the company of her doting parents and a loyal maid, Norma. While she loved them dearly, Achalugo yearned for more. She longed to explore the world beyond the palace, to experience life as other girls did, free and unsheltered. One bright and sunny morning, as Norma was helping her dress in a beautiful silk gown, Achalugo's curiosity bubbled over. With a voice tinged with longing, she asked, "Nne, where is the most beautiful place in our village?" Norma paused, her hand still. Looking at Achalugo, she was struck once again by the princess's stunning beauty, which she had watched blossom since Achalugo was a child. Nneoma had grown much older, yet she never ceased to be amazed by the princess's grace. Knowing Achalugo's secluded life, she understood the depth of her loneliness. Smiling softly, Nneoma replied, "Well, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and everyone cherishes different places. But to me, the finest place has always been the Ngene River. It's a peaceful haven that captured my heart as a little girl. I would visit it every single day, delighting in its serene waters and the gentle rustle of the leaves." As Nneoma recounted her memories, her eyes lit up with joy of the days gone by. The river still held a special place in her heart, a remnant of a carefree youth spirit in nature's embrace. Achalugo listened, her imagination whisked away to the flowing waters and lush banks of Ngene River. She had only seen rivers in books and paintings, and Nneoma's description painted a picture so vivid, it made her heart ache to experience it herself. Eagerly, Achalugo looked up at Nneoma with wide, pleading eyes. "Please, could you take me there, just once?" Nneoma's expression turned serious. She placed a finger on her lips and whispered, "Shh, not so loud. Your father, the king, would never allow such a thing. He would be furious if he knew even of your asking. It could be very dangerous for both of us." But Achalugo was persistent. "Please, Nne, just once. We could go secretly using a path where no one would see us. My father wouldn't have to know." Seeing the princess's desperation, Nneoma hesitated, then finally nodded. "Okay, but just this once." She knew Achalugo never asked for much, and her loneliness weighed heavily on her heart. "I'll find the right time, when your parents are occupied. The river isn't far, and we'll return quickly. Just give me a moment to plan properly." Overwhelmed with gratitude and excitement, Achalugo hugged Nneoma tightly. Nneoma, committed to bringing a moment of joy to the young princess, began to devise a safe plan. The thought of the adventure brought a rare sparkle to Achalugo's eyes, filling Nneoma with resolve to make it happen. As Nneoma began to devise a plan for sneaking out of the palace with Princess Achalugo, her heart was heavy with worry. What if they were caught? What if something terrible happened to the princess during their adventure? She knew the king's wrath all too well. He would not hesitate to punish her severely. Despite these fears, Nneoma had promised the princess, who was already filled with excitement about seeing the world outside the palace walls for the first time. One quiet evening, when the palace seemed more hushed than usual, Nneoma knew it was the right moment. The king and queen were relaxing in their private chambers, and the usual bustle of the palace had simmered down to a gentle lull. Thus, Nneoma thought was her chance. She approached the palace guards at the main gate. With a mix of pleading and persuasion, she offered them a bundle of savory meats and a collection of small valuable gifts. Her heart pounded as she waited for their decision, hoping her bribe would be enough. After a few tense moments, the guards nodded in agreement, swayed by Nneoma's offerings and the promise of keeping their acceptance a secret. Quickly, Nneoma returned to Achalugo, helping her cover up with a simple cloak and a veil to conceal her identity. Together, they slipped through the palace gates, their hearts racing with a mix of fear and thrill. They took a lesser-known bush path that wound through the thick foliage, leading towards the cherished stream. As they walked through the underbush, Nneoma felt an overwhelming sense of relief mixed with exhilaration. She was outside the confined walls of the palace without the heavy escorts that usually shadowed her steps. For the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of freedom, though it was tinged with the constant fear of discovery. The Ngene River was a revelation to Princess Achalugo. She had never laid her eyes before on such a breathtaking spectacle. The river's waters glistened under the sun, sparkling like thousands of tiny jewels scattered across a vast flowing canvas. The air around the river was filled with a tranquil peace, and a gentle breeze whispered through the leaves, adding a soothing melody to the serene setting. Achalugo stood at the water's edge, completely mesmerized by the beauty before her. She knew deep in her heart that she would find her way back to this magical place again. Norma watched the princess, her face lit up with a radiant smile unlike any she had seen before. If there was ever a perfect representation of peace, it was right here, in the gentle lap of the river's waters against the shore. "It's so beautiful," Achalugo whispered, almost afraid that speaking too loudly might shatter the magical calm of the place. Norma nodded, her eyes reflecting a mix of nostalgia and sadness. "This was where I came after I lost my mother when I was 15, she shared with Achalugo, her voice soft with memory. "Whenever I stand by these waters, I feel enchanted, as if the river washes away all my worries and sadness. It's not just beautiful, Achalugo, it's magical." Achalugo believed every word. Standing there, she could feel the magic Norma described. The river seemed to possess a power that calmed the mind and soothed the soul. However, after some time, Norma gently reminded her that they needed to head back to the palace before their absence was discovered. Reluctantly, Achalugo agreed. She didn't want to leave, but she knew staying longer would risk Norma's safety. As they began their journey back, she made a silent vow to return. With each step away from the river, Achalugo committed every twist and turn of their path to memory, determined to find her way back to this slice of paradise. They arrived back at the palace under the cover of darkness. The king remained in his chambers and the queen was none the wiser. Only the guards at the gates knew of their departure and return, and they kept their secrets, bound by their promise and the bribes they had accepted. Inside, Achalugo felt a spark of rebellion ignite within her, a promise of future adventures to the Ngene River, her newfound sanctuary. Just 2 days after her secret visit to the Ngene River, Princess Achalugo found herself yearning to return. The beauty and tranquility of the river had left a deep impression on her, stirring emotions she had never known before. She wanted to see the river again, to feel the soothing peace it brought her, knowing that her loyal maid Norma would never approve of another secretive outing. Achalugo decided she must find a way to go by herself. The next morning, under the veil of dawn's first light, Achalugo wrapped herself in her cloak and veil, masking her royal identity as best as she could. Her heart pounded with a mix of fear and excitement as she tiptoed from her room, her steps soft and barely making a sound on the cold palace floors. She approached the main gate where the chief guard Chekube was stationed. Chekube was taken aback to see the princess out so early. He bowed deeply, respect and surprise mingling in his voice. "What do I owe this special visit, my princess?" he asked, his eyes wide with curiosity. Achalugo put a finger to her lips, signaling him to keep his voice down. "I have a favor to ask of you," she whispered, her voice earnest and pleading, "and I would be so honored if you grant me this request." The chief guard looked puzzled, wondering what such a young princess could possibly need from him. Achalugo reached into her cloak and pulled out a golden bracelet, shimmering with the light of the sun. She held it out to him. "This bracelet is very expensive and it costs a lot of money. You could sell it and do whatever you desire with the money," she continued, her voice soft yet determined. I only ask that you allow me visit the Ngene River alone in the evenings. I will be very quick and no one will find out. Please, she implored, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Chekube hesitated, holding the precious bracelet in his hands. It was undoubtedly valuable and the temptation was strong. Yet, fear of the king's wrath clouded his mind. The consequences of defying the king were severe. My princess, he began cautiously. I'm afraid of the king. He would be furious if he ever finds out. Seeing his hesitation, Achalugo pleaded earnestly with him, her royal demeanor giving way to desperation. Please, I beg of you, do me this favor, she pleaded, her voice cracking as if she were on the verge of tears. Moved by the princess's earnest plea, Chekube made his decision. He knew this meant a great deal to her. I will help you, he promised quietly. He planned to sell the gold bracelet and distribute some of the money to the guards, ensuring their silence. Relief washed over Achalugo as she thanked him, her heart swelling with gratitude and joy. She returned to the palace, her steps lighter than before, filled with the promise of returning to the river that had captured her heart. Every day after lunch, the palace would sink into a quiet lull as its inhabitants retreated to their rooms for an afternoon rest. The guards relaxed a little, the servants found corners for quick naps, and the hustle and bustle of the morning slowed into a peaceful silence. Norma, Princess Achalugo's faithful maid, would also take this time to retire to her own room. Like many others, she typically spent this break in slumber, recharging for the task that awaited her in the evening. Seizing this tranquil period, Princess Achalugo crafted a clever routine to slip away unnoticed. She dressed herself in plain garments and covered her face with a veil, disguising her royal identity just enough to avoid attention. Before leaving, she would lock her bedroom door from the inside, making it appear as though she was still there, resting like the others. Quiet as a shadow, she then sneaked out of the palace, her heart pounding with the thrill of her covert escape. This secret escape became a daily ritual for Achalugo. The Ngene River had become her sanctuary, a place where she could experience the freedom she craved so deeply. Each visit filled her with a profound sense of peace and wonder. She would sit by the river's edge, watching its water flow freely and gracefully. The sight of the river, moving, unbounded and full of life, symbolized the freedom Achalugo longed for. It soothed her spirit and filled her soul with a tranquility she found nowhere else within the palace walls. Though she was utterly enchanted by the river's beauty and the serenity it offered, Achalugo never dared to step into the water. Perhaps it was fear of the unknown, or a deep-seated respect for the natural force and mystery of the river, but she was content to simply sit and admire its beauty from the shore. To her, the river was not just a body of water, it was a magical presence in her life, a hidden gem that she cherished deeply in her heart. One sunny afternoon, as Princess Achalugo sat by the serene Ngene River, a daring thought crossed her mind. She had never swum before, but the gentle ripple of the cold river waters looked so inviting. A refreshing dip might just be what she needed. There's always a first time for everything, she whispered to herself, imagining the cool embrace of the river around her. With a mix of excitement and nervousness, she carefully removed her jewelry, clothes, and veil, placing them neatly at the river bank. She then cautiously stepped into the water, feeling its coolness kiss her toes. Before long, she plunged into the river, eager to experience its magical touch. However, the water was deeper and the current stronger than she had anticipated. Panic struck as she found herself unable to stay afloat. She began to struggle, her arms failing as she tried to call out for help. The river was usually deserted, a secret haven for just her, and fear gripped her heart as she realized that there might be no one to hear her cries. Meanwhile, a young man named Emeka was sitting quietly at the river bank, lost in his thoughts. The peaceful river was his place to escape the noise of daily life. Suddenly, his thoughts were shattered by a desperate cry for help. Startled, he looked up and saw a young lady in distress in the river. Without a second thought, Emeka, who was an excellent swimmer, ran and dove into the water. He swam quickly to the struggling princess and with strong, confident strokes brought her back to the shore. Achalugo was unconscious by the time they reached the bank. She had swallowed a lot of water and was not breathing well. Gently, Emeka laid her on the ground and began to help her breathe again. His heart skipped a beat as he watched her. Her eyes were still closed, but just in that moment, he couldn't stop staring at this beauty. She was breathtaking and no word could describe it. He had never seen anyone as beautiful as she was before. He was carried away by the mind-blowing sight when Achalugo coughed up water and gasped for air, her eyes fluttering open to meet those of her rescuer. The sight that greeted her was nothing short of a storybook illustration. Emeka, with his well-chiseled face and bright eyes, looked exactly like the prince she had often dreamed of in her fantasies. Even as she recovered from her near-drowning experience, she couldn't help but be struck by his handsome features. As they sat on the riverbank, both were momentarily lost in each other's gaze, their hearts skipping beats. The moment was broken when Achalugo suddenly remembered the danger of her situation. "You saved me from drowning," she asked, her voice a mixture of gratitude and surprise. Emeka nodded modestly, realizing only then the gravity of what had just happened. He stood up, still processing the events. Achalugo's heart swelled with gratitude, and she thanked him profusely. However, panic set in as she remembered her royal duty to remain unseen. She quickly gathered her belongings and, without a proper goodbye, rushed back to the palace, leaving a bewildered Emeka staring after her, wondering about the identity of the mysterious maiden he had just saved. As she hurried back, Achalugo knew she would never forget the young man who had saved her life, nor the magical river that had almost claimed it. Her heart was heavy with secrets as she slipped back into the palace, unseen by anyone but the young man whose life had briefly intertwined with hers. For many long weeks, Princess Achalugo was confined to her room in the palace, struck down by a sudden illness that left her weak and bedridden. The palace healers called upon the village herbalist, who prepared special herbal concoctions to help her recover. As she sipped the bitter medicines day after day, she slowly began to regain her strength and vitality. Throughout her illness, Achalugo's mind often wandered back to the river and the dramatic day she was saved from its depths. More than anything, she thought of the handsome stranger who had rescued her. At times, it felt like a dream. Was it possible that such a perfect person really existed? He had the chiseled features and kind eyes of the prince she had always imagined in her dreams. The memory of his face haunted her, and she longed to see him again, to thank him properly for saving her life, and perhaps to get to know him better. Meanwhile, Emeka, the young man who had saved Achalugo, found himself drawn to the Ingene River day after day. He couldn't shake off the image of the beautiful maiden he had rescued. Each day, he hoped to catch another glimpse of her, to ensure she was well, or maybe just to speak to her once more. But no matter how many times he visited the river, she was nowhere to be found. He started to wonder if she was even real, or perhaps a figment of his imagination. a beautiful ghost who had appeared just long enough to be saved. Despite the frustration of never seeing her again, Emeka refused to give up. He believed that fate had brought them together for a reason, and he clung to the hope that the river, the scene of their dramatic encounter, would one day bring them back together. "I will never stop hoping to see her," he told himself firmly, feeling in his heart that their paths were meant to cross again. This belief became a beacon for him, guiding him back to the river's edge time and time again, each visit fueled by a mixture of hope and determination. Emeka was the cherished son of Madueke, a renowned goldsmith in the village, whose skill with precious metal was legendary. Madueke's heart had been shadowed by sadness since the death of his beloved wife, Chinwe, when Emeka was just a boy. Emeka bore a striking resemblance to his late mother, both in appearance and his gentle, kind nature, which endeared him even more to his father. After Chinwe's death, Madueke had remarried, hoping to find companionship and perhaps more children. However, his new wife, Uju, harbored a deep-seated resentment towards Emeka. She had never been able to bear children of her own, and her jealousy of Emeka's close relationship with Madueke was palpable. To the outside world, Uju showed a facade of affection towards Emeka, but beneath the surface, her feelings were far from warm. She was always on the lookout for a chance to undermine him, though she dared not act openly for fear of Madueke's reaction. Madueke was not only fond of Emeka, but also deeply proud of him. As he grew older, he had gradually handed over the reins of his goldsmith business to Emeka, who managed it with remarkable aptitude. Under Emeka's diligent stewardship, the business flourished even more, attracting customers from across the kingdom and beyond, which only increased Madueke's wealth and reputation. This success made Madueke frequently boast about his son, often exclaiming to anyone who cared to listen, "Emeka, my son, did this," or "Emeka, the strength of my youth, did that." This constant praise only fueled Uju's bitterness, as she saw Emeka a barrier to her gaining more influence and regard in Madueke's eyes. She began conceiving wicked thoughts, patiently waiting for an opportunity to harm him. True to his father's praises, Emeka was indeed a remarkable young man. Not only did he possess striking good looks, but he was also diligent, compassionate, and genuinely kind-hearted. With Emeka at the helm, his father's goldsmith business thrived even more than ever. His innovative ideas and meticulous craftsmanship attracted a steady stream of customers from across the kingdom and beyond, significantly enhancing the business's reputation and profitability. This success elevated Madueke to the status of the richest goldsmith in the kingdom, a title he wore with a blend of pride and humility, always quick to credit his son for their good fortune. Beyond his professional achievements, Emeka shared a love for nature, much like Princess Achalugo. The Ngene River, with its calming waters and tranquil surroundings, was his sanctuary. After long demanding days at the workshop, where the delicate crafting and trading of jewelry demanded his constant attention and precision, Emeka found solace by the river. It was here, amidst the gentle sounds of flowing water and rustling leaves, that he could unwind and reflect on his day. The river not only provided him with a respite from his responsibilities, but also connected him to a sense of peace and contentment, reinforcing his deep affection for the natural beauty of his homeland. Once Princess Achalugo had fully recovered from her illness, she couldn't wait to visit the Ngene River again. However, she made a solemn promise to herself never to swim again. That afternoon, she carefully disguised herself, donning her veil to ensure no one recognized her. Deep down, she wasn't just eager to see the tranquil river. She was also hoping to catch another glimpse of the handsome man who had captured her heart. Upon arriving at the river, Achalugo scanned the area for the young man but was initially disappointed when she didn't spot him. She settled herself at the river bank, her gaze lost in the gentle flow of the water. Although the river was as beautiful as ever, it couldn't fully satisfy her longing today. After a while, she decided to head home, and just then she saw him walking towards her. She was utterly swept off her feet. He looked like a demigod. A soft whistle flew out of her mouth as she stared at him. Emeka's heart was beating with excitement when he saw her. He recognized her with her features immediately, but wondered why she had her face covered. She just couldn't imagine how he had come to this river every day, hoping to see her. He felt like sweeping her into his arms, but thought otherwise. He wouldn't want to scare her. As he approached, they exchanged greetings. "How are you?" Emeka asked, taking his seat by the river bank. His voice filled with genuine concern. "I've been worried about you since that day at the river. I hope you didn't fall ill." Her smile in response lit up her eyes. Knowing that he had thought about her brought a deep sense of happiness. They sat at the river bank and began chatting effortlessly. Emeka was humorous, making her laugh more than she had in a long time. They talked about the river, nature, and their lives, creating a connection as if they had known each other for years. Achalugo had never felt such an easy rapport with anyone before, and she cherished every moment. However, as the evening wore on and it grew late, Achalugo realized she had stayed far longer than intended. She quickly stood up to head back to the palace. Emeka had enjoyed the evening, but something was off. Her veil, and secondly, whenever he asked her personal questions, trying to get to know her, she usually brushed it off with laughter. Achalugo raced back along the bush path towards the palace, unaware that Emeka, driven by a sudden impulse, was following her. His curiosity turned to astonishment as he watched her enter the royal palace. It all clicked. The veil, her guarded responses, her elegance. It was the princess. He, Emeka, had seen the princess. His heart bubbled with joy as no one in the entire village had ever set their eyes on her. Talk more of talking to her. But he had had the honor not only to see her, but touch her, and today he made her laugh. Whenever she sat on the royal horse, veiled, he had always imagined what she was like. But today he had confirmed that she was the goddess some of the villagers had called her. His heart swelled with joy at the honor, but it was soon tempered by a wave of sadness. He had allowed himself to dream of a future with her, but now he understood the vast divide between their world. He was not a reality, and she was beyond his reach. With a heavy heart, Emeka turned and walked back home, his joy overshadowed by the realization of their impossible circumstances. As Achalugo walked into the palace, she was immediately struck by the furious expression on King Azuka's face. She had never seen her father this angry before. The air was thick with tension as the palace guards and her faithful maid Norma stood rigidly before him. The king's voice echoed loudly and angrily throughout the vast room. Who let her out of this palace? Achalugo felt a wave of fear wash over her. She knew she was in serious trouble, and without hesitating, she knelt before her father, her voice trembling as she pleaded for mercy. "Father, please forgive me," she implored, her eyes brimming with tears. "I forced them into letting me go out. I even threatened to take my own life if they didn't comply. Please have mercy on them. They only did what they thought was best to protect me, and it's all my fault, and not on them." King Azuka's face was a mask of wrath mixed with concern. Though he was visibly angry, the distress in his daughter's voice and the sight of her tears softened his heart, even if it was just a little. He loved Achalugo deeply and had always struggled to balance his duty as a king with his affection as a father. With a heavy sigh, he commanded in a stern voice, "You all should get out of my sight." His gaze then turned back to Achalugo, his voice slightly softer, but he still felt angry as he pointed at her. "As for you," he said firmly, "you are grounded. You must not leave this palace ever again. If you do, you will face my wrath." Achalugo bowed her head in resignation as she stood up to leave. Tears streamed down her cheeks, a silent testament to her sorrow. She had always known that her adventures outside the palace walls might one day lead to this moment, but she had hoped it wouldn't come so soon. The thought of never seeing her newfound friend Emeka again weighed heavily on her heart. Despite the king's decree, her mind raced with memories of the river, the laughter and the connection she had felt. Even as she walked away from her father's presence, her spirit ached for the freedom and friendship that now seemed more distant than ever. Every day in the palace was a struggle and torture for Princess Achalugo, as she yearned deeply to see Emeka again. She would often find herself sitting by her window, gazing out at the landscape, hoping against hope to catch a glimpse of him passing by. This longing brought her a pain sharper than any she had ever known, making each day feel like an endless torture. Meanwhile, Emeka found himself drawn to the stream daily, each visit fueled by the slim hope of seeing Achalugo. As days turned into weeks without any sign of her, he began to worry. One evening, driven by a mix of concern and longing, he ventured as close to the palace as he dared, hoping to catch at least a glimpse of her. He wondered if she had fallen ill again or if something worse had befallen her. But there was no news around the village. The palace walls loomed high and imposing before him, blocking all but the smallest hope of seeing her. He walked along the perimeter, his eyes scanning the high windows, trying to guess which one might be hers. He stood there for a long time, filled with a sense of helplessness, wishing he knew where to look. Back in her room, Achalugo was sitting by her window when she suddenly spotted Emeka. Her heart leaped with joy at the sight of him. She watched as he paced below, looking lost and searching for something he couldn't find. She wanted to call out to him, to shout his name, but she knew she couldn't risk being heard. Then an idea struck her. Her window was near the palace fence, close enough that she could perhaps get a small object to him to catch his attention. Hurrying to her closet, she grabbed a single shoe and threw it out the window towards him. Startled, Emeka picked up the shoe and looked up in the direction from which it had come. There he saw Achalugo at her window. His heart fluttered with a mix of relief and joy. They couldn't speak to each other because they were far, but their smiles bridged the distance between them. As the evening shadows grew longer and it began to darken, Emeka waved goodbye and left, his spirit lifted by the brief connection. He realized that she must be grounded, confined to the palace grounds. This silent exchange by the window became their new routine. Achalugo, unable to keep her feelings to herself any longer, confided in Nneoma about her impossible love. "He looks so handsome," she would say, recalling their brief encounters. But Nneoma, ever practical, warned her, "The king would never allow you to be together. You are his only child and must marry only royal blood so that you can rule this kingdom together with your husband. It's best to let this love go." However, Princess Achalugo was not swayed by Nneoma's advice. She had thought of getting married to some prince just so he could rule her father's kingdom, and she had never seen it possible. She wanted to marry a man she was in love with. She was madly in love with Emeka, and no reasoning could dampen her feelings. Nneoma, respecting the depth of the princess's emotions, promised to keep her secret, guarding it closely within the walls of the palace. For many days, Princess Achalugo waited by her window, hoping to catch a glimpse of Emeka, but he never appeared. Each day ended with her heart heavier than before, and she often found herself crying to sleep, her pillow damp with tears. Her mind was filled with worry. She prayed nothing terrible had happened to him. As days turned into weeks, a dreadful thought began to haunt her. Perhaps Emeka had given up, thinking their love was too impossible to pursue. This thought shattered her heart completely. She was deeply in love with him and clung to the hope that maybe he was just busy with work or otherwise occupied. But as months passed away without any sign of Emeka, Achalugo's hope dimmed. Meanwhile, a sinister plot was unfolding in the village. Uju, Emeka's stepmother, had grown increasingly resentful of the affection Madueke, her husband, showed towards Emeka. She was bitter that Madueke never spoke as highly of her as he did of Emeka. Despite her efforts to bear a son, she had failed, and her frustration had turned into a deep-seated jealousy. Driven by her envy, Uju ventured into a remote forest to seek the aid of a wicked witch doctor known for his dark powers. Her heart was filled with malice as she approached him with her request. "I want you to make him mad," she said bitterly. "Make him so mad that he will wander through the village, not knowing himself all the days of his life. He has stolen my husband's heart, and I want him out of my family." The witch doctor's laughter echoed through the dark woods, chilling and cruel. "Consider it done," he cackled. "I will cast a spell of madness on him, a spell that only the impossible can break. He will be out of your way forever, and when your husband can no longer rely on his precious son, he will turn to only you." His laughter boomed again, filled with wicked delight. Uju left the forest feeling victorious, her heart twisted with satisfaction. By the time she returned to the village, Emeka was already afflicted by the spell, wandering the streets in confusion, his condition deteriorating rapidly. Back at her home, Uju felt a perverse sense of triumph, almost as if she wanted to throw a celebration for finally achieving her goal. Madueke was devastated when he saw what had become of his beloved son. Emeka, who had once been the pillar of strength and source of pride, now roamed the village aimlessly, often dirty and disheveled, begging at the market. Madueke sought the help of numerous herbalists, but none could break the mysterious spell or even explain Emeka's sudden madness. The pain of seeing his son in such state was unbearable for him, and he withdrew from everybody, consumed by his grief. This tragic turn of events was why Princess Achalugo had not seen Emeka. Unaware of the dark forces at work, she could only wait and watch from her window, her heart aching for a sight of him, not knowing the cruel fate that had befallen her beloved. As the days turned into weeks, Emeka's situation deteriorated rapidly. His father, Madueke, had exhausted every possible remedy to cure his son, but nothing seemed to work. Each failed attempt only deepened his despair, and he found himself unable to face Uju and her daughters, choosing instead to spend his days drowned in sorrow and tears. One fateful day, Nneoma, the princess's loyal maid, returned to the palace from the market, breathless and panting. She had run the entire distance back, filled by urgency and shock. Bursting into Princess Achalugo's room, she barely had time to catch her breath before speaking. "Guess what?" she exclaimed. Achalugo looked up, her heart pounding with anticipation, eager to hear the news Nneoma brought. "I can't guess," the princess replied anxiously, sensing the gravity in Nneoma's demeanor. Taking a deep breath, Nneoma steadied herself. "I saw Emeka at the market today," she revealed. Achalugo's eyes sparkled with a fleeting hope, but it quickly faded when she noticed the sadness shadowing Nnoma's features. "I guessed it," Achalugo responded with a heavy heart, fearing the worst. "I knew he was married." "Not married, my princess," Nnoma corrected her softly, the weight of her words heavy in the air. "He is now mad." The words struck Achalugo like a thunderbolt. "What do you mean, mad? Emeka is mad? How?" Tears instantly began streaming down her face. Nnoma continued, her voice a whisper of sorrow. "I saw him wandering the market almost naked. It's serious, my princess. They say he's always there, lost and confused." Without a moment's hesitation, Achalugo sprang to her feet, her resolve hardening. Driven by a sudden surge of energy and courage, she began to dress in her royal gown and don her veil. Her heart, still fiercely loyal to Emeka, compelled her to act. No matter his condition, he had once saved her life, and she would not abandon him now. Determined, she prepared to defy her father's strict orders for the sake of her love. "Where are you going?" Nnoma asked, alarmed by the princess's actions. "To see Emeka, and no one should stand in my way," Achalugo declared with a fiery intensity. Nnoma tried to dissuade her, but seeing the unyielding determination in the princess's eyes, she stepped aside, watching helplessly as Achalugo stormed out of the door. Achalugo rushed to the stables, commanding one of the guards to bring fresh clothes and accompany her to the village market. Her royal training and resolve shone through as she approached the gate, where the guards hesitated to let her pass. Seeing their reluctance, she grabbed a sword, ready to fight her way through if necessary. Trained in the swordmanship by the king himself, she was a formidable figure, and her fierce determination quickly persuaded the guards to relent. They opened the gate and she galloped away on the royal horse, leaving the guards scrambling to alert the king of her departure. The king, upon hearing of his daughter's defiant departure, became fraught with worry and tension. He backed orders at the guards, commanding them to follow her immediately and ensure her safety. Meanwhile, Princess Achalugo, fueled by determination and love, rode swiftly through the streets like a seasoned warrior. Her royal steed carried her quickly to the market, drawing surprised glances and murmurs from the villagers as she arrived. It was rare for royalty to make such an unexpected appearance among the common folk. Accompanied by her guards, she quickly began searching through the crowd for Emeka. It didn't take long for them to find him. Emeka was wandering aimlessly, his appearance so disheveled and dirty that he was barely recognizable. Seeing him in such a state shattered the princess's heart. Tears streamed down her face as she witnessed the toll that madness had taken on the man she loved. Determined to restore his dignity, she instructed the guards with her to help lift Emeka onto his horse. However, Emeka, in his confused and frenzied state, proved too strong and erratic to be easily handled. Realizing this, Princess Achalugo dismounted her horse and approached Emeka gently. She spoke to him softly, her voice imbued with warmth and familiarity. To the astonishment of everyone watching, her words seemed to reach through the fog of his madness. Emeka calmed almost immediately, his demeanor shifting as he recognized her voice. He allowed himself to be guided to the horse by the guard without further resistance. The crowd at the market watched in awe, whispering among themselves about the remarkable scene unfolding before them. They marveled at how the princess could communicate so effectively with someone lost in the throes of madness. With Emeka now more cooperative, the group made their way to the Ngene River. The princess chose this secluded spot for its privacy, away from the curious and often judgmental eyes of the villagers. At the river, they planned to bathe Emeka and shave him, hoping to bring some comfort and semblance of normalcy to his tormented existence. As the road of the villagers continued to talk, their respect for the princess growing with every compassionate action. When the other guards arrived at the bustling market, they found that the princess and Chalugo had already left. The villagers, quick to notice the commotion, pointed them towards the Ngene River, saying that the princess and her party had headed in that direction. Without wasting a moment, the guards hurriedly pursued them, anxious about what they might find. At the serene banks of the Ngene River, the princess was deeply involved in caring for Emeka. She shaved his hair and instructed the guards with her to bathe Emeka, task that he performed with a sense of duty and curiosity. Once clean, Emeka was dressed in fresh clothes that the princess had brought along. He looked almost like his old self again, a transformation that left the guard puzzled about the princess's deep interest in this troubled man. However, he knew better than to question her actions. After all, she was royalty. The princess then sat on the soft grass by the river and began to feed Emeka, who ate with a voracious hunger yet remained surprisingly calm under her gentle care. She was still spoon-feeding him when the other guards sent by the king finally caught up and surrounded them at the river bank. The chief guard stepped forward, his voice firm, as he relayed the king's command. The king demanded to return to the palace now, he ordered sternly. Unfazed, the princess looked up from her task and responded with equal firmness. Go back and tell my father I will return after I have taken him to the herbalist. I can't abandon him here. The guards exchanged glances, unsure of how to proceed. The chief guard watched the princess as she continued caring for Emeka, a man lost to madness. Tales of the princess's stubbornness were well known. She was not one to back down from her decisions. The guards began to murmur amongst themselves, questioning if the princess herself was losing touch with reality. What is she doing with a madman? They whispered incredulously. Yet, none of them dared to return to the palace without her, fearing the king's wrath. They decided to wait and observe, half in disbelief, half in awe of the princess's unwavering dedication to the man she obviously cared so deeply about. After she was done feeding him, they all helped lift a now somewhat pacified Emeka onto a horse. Together, they proceeded to the village medicine man, hoping he might have some answers or remedies that could help restore Emeka's mind and solve the mystery of his sudden madness. When the princess and her entourage finally arrived at the humble hut of the village herbalist Nwoye, they were met with a warm and gracious welcome. Nwoye, an elderly man known for his wisdom and skill with herbs, was visibly pleased to have such distinguished guests visit his simple home. As the princess stepped down from her horse, Nwoye bowed slightly, his gesture steeped in respect for the royal presence before him. His eyes held a glint of curiosity and reverence as he looked up to meet the princess's gaze. The princess approached him with a sense of urgency, her voice carrying a mix of hope and desperation. I need a big favor from you, she began earnestly. My friend here is suffering from madness and he needs the best care possible. I would like you to take him in and look after him. I will come here daily to check up on him and ensure he's receiving the proper treatment. Please, help us with everything you can to make him better. I'm willing to pay whatever it takes. Nwoye nodded, his face breaking into a gentle smile, touched by the princess's dedication and concern for her friend. I will take him as if he were my king, he promised, his words laden with sincerity. And in my absence, may my children find favor in your sight. The princess paused, momentarily puzzled by Nwoye's reference to my king. Was he speaking metaphorically of Emeka, acknowledging the nobility of her actions, or was it merely a slip of tongue? Regardless of his intent, his commitment reassured her. Holding Emeka's hand tightly, the princess promised him, I will come to see you tomorrow. Emeka nodded, his response almost seeming to show a flicker of understanding despite his confused state. With everything settled, Nwoye gently led Emeka into his hut, preparing to start the healing process. The princess watched them go, a mix of relief and sadness in her heart. She then turned and signaled to her entourage, and together they left, the sounds of their departure echoing softly through the village. The journey back to the palace was quiet, each member of the party lost in their thoughts, pondering the day's events and the uncertain future that lay ahead for Emeka. The princess, though worried, felt a small glimmer of hope that with Nwoye's help, Emeka might one day return to the man he once was. The atmosphere in the palace was thick with tension. Whispers and rumors about the princess and her association with the madman had finally reached the ear of the king and queen. They were secluded in their royal chamber, a mix of panic and disbelief clouding their expressions. A madman, the queen echoed, her voice tinged with fear and confusion. However, their concern extended beyond just the present scandal. It stirred a deeper, almost forgotten fear connected to a prophecy made long ago. 25 years earlier, when the queen was pregnant with the princess, the village chief priest, Dike, had delivered a startling prophecy. He foretold that the king would have no sons, only a daughter. This daughter was destined to marry a madman chosen by the gods to rule the kingdom after the king, a man marked by madness. Dike had cautioned the king not to despise this madman, as he was the one fated to succeed the throne. The prophecy had seemed absurd to the king, an insult to the royal family's dignity. In his anger and disbelief, he had banished Dike from the village, determined to erase the preposterous prediction from his kingdom. Driven by a desire to prevent the prophecy from coming true, the king and the queen had taken extraordinary measures. They insisted that the princess wear a veil whenever she stepped outside the palace, ensuring that her face remained hidden, particularly from any prophetic madman. They had also restricted her from leaving the palace grounds, all in hopes of shielding her from the fate foretold. Now, as the king and the queen paced their room, the weight of the old prophecy crashed down upon them. It seemed the God's will was unfolding despite their efforts to thwart it. When the princess entered her parents' chamber later, she was met with an unexpected calmness. She had braced herself for anger and rebukes for her disobedience, but instead, she saw resignation in their eyes. Taking a deep breath, she opened up about her experiences with Emeka. "I'm sorry, father and mother. I don't know how he ended up mad, but I love him so much," she confessed, her voice filled with emotion. Listening to his daughter, the king felt a profound shift within him. Her words echoed with sincerity and love, convincing him that perhaps this man was indeed the one chosen by the gods. For years, he had worried about the future of his throne and his lineage, but it appeared that the gods had provided an answer all along. The queen, moved by her daughter's heartfelt declaration, embraced her tightly. Both she and the king then shared the details of the prophecy with the princess, explaining the reasons behind her veiled appearance and the restrictions placed upon her. The princess was stunned, yet a sense of joy bubbled within her. The man she had fallen deeply in love with was not just any man, he was her destined husband. However, her happiness was tempered by worry. Would he ever recover from this madness? Together, the royal family confronted the reality of the prophecy, now more united than ever, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead with newfound hope and determination. The following day, Princess Achalugo prepared to visit Nwoye's hut again, armed with food and accompanied by a few of her royal guards. As always, she covered her face, preserving the mystery of her royal identity. However, nothing could have prepared her for the surprise that awaited her at the herbalist's humble dwelling. As soon as Emeka caught sight of the princess, something miraculous occurred. He stood up swiftly, his eyes alight with recognition and joy. When the princess dismounted from her horse, Emeka rushed to her, wrapping her in a warm, heartfelt embrace. He was overjoyed to see her and had missed her dearly. The princess stood frozen in shock for a moment. Emeka had been healed. The cruel spell of madness that had clouded his mind had vanished the moment the princess had showed him unwavering love, even in his most troubled state. The love she had for Emeka, thought to be impossible by many, was a rare and true love that had broken the spell instantly. Moye, observing the princess's astonishment and perhaps a hint of fear, quickly reassured her that Emeka was indeed back to his normal self. He then shared a startling revelation that Emeka's stepmother had cast a spell of madness upon him, but the powerful pure love of the princess had shattered this dark enchantment. Overjoyed and relieved, the princess looked at Emeka, seeing once again the friend she had known and cherished. Her heart swelled with happiness as she held his hand, feeling the warmth and familiarity of his grasp. Meanwhile, a twist of fate had befallen Uju. The moment Emeka regained his sanity, Uju descended into madness. She wandered through the village, her appearance unkempt and wild, openly confessing her deeds. She revealed how she had driven Emeka to madness through dark magic. Her husband had passed away a few months after Emeka's affliction began, and without the love or respect she had craved, she spiraled into despair and now madness. Emeka was moved to tears when he learned his father had died. His father had always been his hero and mentor, and the loss pained him deeply. Throughout his life, his father's love and guidance had been a constant source of strength and inspiration. Princess Achalugo stayed by Emeka's side, offering comfort and support as they processed the news together. After spending some time with Moye, who provided them with further assurance of Emeka's recovery, they decided it was time to return to Emeka's family home. Emeka walked back into his father's house, no longer a victim of cruel spells, but as a man healed and whole, thanks to the incredible power of love and loyalty shared between him and the princess. Princess Achalugo was filled with joy now that Emeka had returned to his normal self. Upon hearing the news, after a few weeks, which had allowed him the time to mourn his father, the king invited him to the palace. As he approached the king, he was captivated by the looks of the young man, but he still needed to be sure that he deserved his daughter. After Emeka had bowed, reverencing the king, he was asked to sit. Emeka looked around the palace. It looked so beautiful, and he had never been there before, talk more of sitting very close to the king. All right, the king cleared his throat. Firstly, I'm deeply sorry about the death of your father, and I really do hope that you accept my condolence. My daughter has told me a lot about you and how much she wants to be with you. But you don't have to marry her. Tell me what you want. Silver, gold, money. Just mention it. I have it all, and I will give it to you. You can go far with it and live a good life if that's what you want. Emeka felt bad. This was not what he had expected to hear from the king. With all due respect, my king, I am a hard-working man. I may not be as rich as you are, but I can give your daughter, the princess, the life she deserves. I oversee my father's business, and it is doing very well. My love for your daughter is beyond whatever anyone can offer me. Not even this entire kingdom, if given to me, he said, his words filled with sincerity, can be compared to the love I have for your daughter. The king was instantly impressed by Emeka's demeanor and sincerity. Moved by his profound affection and commitment, the king didn't hesitate. I give you my blessing to take her as your wife, he declared, offering his approval without a second thought. Emeka was overwhelmed with happiness. It felt like a dream come true. Being asked by the king himself to marry the princess was an honor beyond his wildest imagination. In a show of gratitude, he prostrated himself on the floor, thanking the king profusely for this incredible honor. As they spent more time together, the king's fondness for Emeka only grew. He admired how Emeka spoke of his father and the way he had expanded his father's business. Despite Emeka's period of madness, his loyal staff had kept the business thriving, which impressed the king even further. Months later, a date was set for the royal wedding. Unknown to Emeka, the wedding day would also be his coronation, a double ceremony that would fulfill an ancient prophecy. When the big day arrived, it was a magnificent celebration. People from all over the kingdom and lands beyond came to witness the event. The king and the queen radiated happiness, and Achalugo could barely contain her excitement. For the first time, her husband would unveil her, allowing the entire kingdom to see her face. The air was electric with excitement. The sight of royalty marrying a commoner and one who had once been mad was unprecedented. The wedding turned into a massive celebration, and the village erupted in joy when Achalugo's face was unveiled. She was stunningly beautiful, an extraordinary sight that took everyone's breath away. But the surprises weren't over yet. As the celebration reached its peak, the king stepped down from his throne, and the kingmakers and the chief priest gathered around Emeka, proclaiming him the new king of Udu. The villagers, though initially shocked, were thrilled. Emeka was well loved by everyone, and their cheers filled the air, shouting, "Long live the king! Long live the king!" Watching the joyous celebrations, the former king felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing his kingdom was in good hands. Together, King Emeka and Queen Achalugo ruled the land with wisdom and compassion. The kingdom flourished under their reign, blessed with peace and prosperity. They were blessed with children and lived happily ever after, their love story a testament to the power of destiny and true love. Hey besties, it's been a very long ride. And if you have watched this story up to this point, I want to really appreciate you for staying tuned to this story. And I hope you learned 1 or 2 lessons from it. I would like you to share your lessons in the comments section. And if you are yet to subscribe to this channel, do not leave without hitting the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so that you can get notified whenever we post new stories. Thank you so much for supporting and loving as always. For right now, I'm going to go and see you in our next story. Bye!
Never lose your faith in God. It will come true for you.